Alright, we're going to do a video on preamplifiers. This video is going to be so simple it's not even funny. What do preamplifiers do? Well, what they're supposed to do is boost the signal. If you've got a microphone or an instrument that's got a weak signal, that it's boosted. Because what happens sometimes is if you've got a weak signal coming through and you're trying to boost it, the complex waveform, whatever, or the sinusoids, whatever's coming through there, is that if the volume on it's real low, you might lose harmonic content of the timbre of the instrument. So you can, there's a lot of videos on this channel. If there's anything here that you're not understanding, there's a video on this channel to explain it. But for the most part, I think anyway. So basically, you're trying to boost the signal because it's got a weak signal, like a dynamic microphone will have a weak signal that needs to get boosted. So you got a knob on the preamplifier to turn the volume up a little bit. You don't want it too loud because you don't want it to clip. So you don't want it, too low, and you don't want it too much in the middle. You want it somewhere between the middle and up. So, somewhere in between, in the middle of that area is normally a safe bet. That way you've got enough level to work with, and there's no chance of you clipping, or there's no chance of it being too weak. And that's a safe place to be. So, that's real simple concept. I mean, what it's doing is its whole purpose is trying to boost the level. Sometimes they'll say they're trying to bring it up to line level, which normally is not true, because you basically are not trying to bring it up to line level. You're just trying to bring it up loud enough to where it's usable. I mean, if you're going to bring it up to line level every time, you're going to have some issues. You're probably not going to be able to get it exactly there, and I don't know why you'd want to anyway. Basically, for the most part, let's say like this blue line here, this is like nominal levels. But just for instance, let's say this is what you'd capture without the preamplifier. So you're trying to boost it up. This would be the level where it's starting to distort or clip or do stuff like that. So basically like 3/4 of the way there, that's kind of where you want it to sit. Boost it up there. That way when it goes into the DAW you're recording, or it's going into your mixing board or wherever, that it's loud enough to work with. Does that make sense? But not too loud where you're getting close to its, its range. Its upper limits, so that you start getting closer. Sometimes that can be, here or there, as far as, I don't ever see that the preamp is supposed to be something to color the sound. That's not its job. But you can buy ones that'll do that all day long. But I do not recommend that in no way, shape, or form. Most time when you're talking about a preamplifier, in the studio, most time they're talking about a microphone preamplifier that can preamplify instrument microphones. It can amplify guitars, all kinds of different things that it can amplify. But basically, it's just to boost the actual level so it's something usable. You look at most preamplifiers, it's basic control. They'll tell you flat out most of the time, if they have any idea what they're talking about, the gain control is the most important function of all, because it's just supposed to boost the level up. That's what its purpose is. Sometimes you'll have some, phantom power is almost a prerequisite nowadays. Phase reverse polarity. Now, to explain that, you need to understand why that is, because, reversing phase, if you've got more than one microphone going, and you might have phase problems because you're using two microphones on the same capture, or multiple microphones, then you might start having phase issues between those microphones, and reversing phase on one of them is a real easy answer. But, that was not its primary purpose, but it is something on there that's usable. So, when you're looking at preamplifiers, there are tons of them out there. I mean, there are preamplifiers. There's so many different kind of preamplifiers, it's not funny. Now, I'm not even going to address things like, tube preamplifiers and things like that, because that's something that's going to be that way no matter what. You want a clean signal. If you want to buy a separate tube preamplifier because for coloration for certain things, great, but don't make that your primary way. But if you make your primary one a good one it's a clean capture, that it's just boosting the signal cleanly as possible. So, and you understand, if you went back and watched those videos on microphones and everything we talked about there, all the tools you need to go through and look at these preamps are in that series. So, basically this is almost like an addendum to that series, because you're dealing with another instrument that has a purpose of boosting that instrument we were talking about in that series. And all the things that can go wrong in there can be basically the same kind of things that can be going wrong in the microphone. So I'm going to refer you back to that series, and you can apply a whole lot of that stuff, and most of that stuff, to your decision making, to decision making with preamplifiers. Now the problem is you go look at good preamplifiers that, here's a really good, I was reading here, and it was like, this was really cool because this kind of sums it up. The curious thing about high-end preamps is, if you notice, they don't have nearly as many features as the budget models. Yet they cost several times as much. Why? Budget gear typically does many jobs decently. High-end gear does one job extremely well. So you'll find that, that preamp's actually a preamp. It's not doing some other stuff. So another huge thing you can run into is this other preamplifier that you're buying has all these other knobs and EQ and all kinds of stuff, high cut, low pass, filters, all stuff, knobs and buttons all over the dang place, to try to help you deal with the crap that they sold you. The basic algorithm and circuit that's supposed to be just preamplifier is garbage, and so they put all this other crap to try to deal with it. Or it might not be, and that other stuff is to work with and stuff, do other things that the preamplifier is not actually supposed to be. So I try to keep that separate in your mind. If you're going to buy a preamplifier that does other things than just boost the signal, that's other stuff. Look at it as other stuff. Don't look at it as part of your preamp, even though it might be part of the actual piece of hardware. Those are different things. All you want is you've got a weak signal that if it's too low, you might be losing content of the capture when you record, and so you're trying to boost it. You don't want it. Like if you've got a level here and here's the max and this is the minimum on it, that you want to come down like 20%. And that's normally where I recommend recording it from. That way you're not anywhere near the upper limit of it, because you don't need to be. You're just trying to boost it up. I mean, there might be some circumstances where you might really want to push it because you're having serious problem with some microphone or some instrument that's absolutely got no power, but it's not very likely. And I don't recommend it for coloring anything. That's not its purpose. So, when you're looking at your preamps, that, there's all kinds of things to look at. And I definitely do recommend you go and get some spec sheets on different amplifiers, preamps, high-end ones that are just preamps, not a lot of other crap on them. And really look at them. You'd be worried about your impedance, your input and output impedance. You'd be really interested in things like noise levels. The noise level, the bottom, if we're looking at that microphone series, this noise EIN is basically the same thing as self noise level. And then you're looking at over here, measured noise, minus 191 dB. That's pretty good, that's pretty low. You're looking at, distortion, this number here, it's kind of confusing, but I'm pretty sure what they're talking about here is 0.03% total harmonic distortion is probably what you're looking. And if anything under, anything that low is probably going to be fine. As low as possible. But compare some and take a look around. Those are the things you're going to be concerned about, because basically that's its function. I'm not making a whole video series on the preamplifier because that's all it does. It's basically the whole basic concept of it is you've got this sinusoid coming through here that's really quiet, like when we're looking at this microphone thing or when we're looking at this line level, then it's really quiet. And it's got a volume knob on it to turn it up. That way that, you might not be losing anything when you record from it being so soft. And it's not up really loud like at peak, but it's down about 20% from what they're saying peak is, and somewhere in there. That way you got a good safe capture. It's probably captured everything you're trying to capture, but you're going nowhere near anything what is max. Does that make sense? So you don't get distortion and noise and things like that. So it's really a basic thing because, when people tell me about that, I look at them and I go, okay, well, you got this preamplifier. Now, this is a tube mic, but, it don't really matter what you're looking at. The concept is that, that's what it's got, a volume knob. When you start getting all these things, a low cut, high cut, you want to pad this out, minus 20 dB, all this other stuff. That's what this big old knob is for, that's what it is for. To turn it up or turn it down, and if it's getting way more complicated than that, then more than likely you're dealing with a garbage circuit that they're trying to sell you. Or they're trying to get you to deal with things that shouldn't be part of the preamplifier that they've went ahead and incorporated into the system, which can be a good thing sometimes if they've done a good job. But, that's not its purpose. When they start mixing those things together, now you're starting to do, sound sculpting on this piece of audio you're trying to capture before you've even done the capture. Does that make sense? Maybe the same things you have in all those knobs on your microphone. Does that make sense? Which, you don't, so, that's not its purpose. So I don't want to get long-winded on this, but that's basically what I wanted to point out. This is a one video series on preamps because look for that. That's its primary purpose, for it to do it as cleanly as possible with as little distortion and saturation as possible, and and boost the levels well. And any of the other parameters you're looking at when you're looking at, when you're looking at specs, go back to the video series that I showed on microphones and go through and watch that series, because then it'll make a lot better. You get a lot better understanding that that's its primary purpose. Now, when you're starting to have to deal with it and you go, well, what's its frequency response and how is it affecting my impulse response, and what's it doing to this or what's it doing to that? That kind of stuff, it's like, well, there's problems in the circuitry because you want as flat as frequency. You don't want it affecting it. One of the biggest things you'll understand in signal processing is the more processing you do, like let's say this has got 0.5% total harmonic distortion. Next one's got 0.5% total harmonic distortion. The next one's got 0.5 total harmonic distortion. Well, any kind of thing like that, or any parameter or any specification, as you use more and more and more pieces of equipment, that there's a chance it's building that and multiplying that. So, and the more things that are in that circuit for that preamplifier, the more chance it's going to cause more crap in your signal, which you don't want. The preamplifier isn't to do all that stuff. It's just to boost the level so that it's loud enough to make sure that when you record, that it's recording everything you're trying to capture. Does that make sense? But not too loud to where it's distortion. And never for coloration. People say, I'm by a tube, preamp because, it's got the saturation. Well, the chances are that, unless you're recording one type of music all the time, that there's going to be times you're not going to want that, or you're really not paying attention to the mix anyway, because sometimes you just don't. Myself, I try to capture everything as clean as possible, and if I want to do anything to it, it happens in the DAW. Does that make sense? So, I stand by that. Now, the other thing is that, what else are you dealing with? Well, nothing really. Those are the basic concepts you have to deal with. So, I want you to go back and watch that series on microphones, and this is kind of an addendum to that, because that preamp is basically dealing with the issues that we're talking about in microphones, but it can be applied to the guitar and things like that also. But, its basic concept, why it was incorporated, was for the microphones and things like that, or instruments with low signals, which basically is the same concept. So those same basic concepts that you may have problems with, as far as, there was a general discussion at the beginning of that series about general issues, frequency response, sensitivities, all kinds of things, noise floor, all those things. Go back and watch that video series and apply that knowledge to what you're dealing with in this preamp. And try to remember that its whole basic concept and what it's supposed to do is that simple. That way, you're looking at some preamplifiers, and it's like, well, I'm looking at this preamplifier from a stereo system, and it's a high-end one, dude. That's all that's going on, bro. Does that make sense? Well, when you buy one for the studio that's got, 500 flashy buttons and knobs and push buttons all over the dang place, that what are you buying? The whole problem is you come to two problems. First problem is they're trying to incorporate all kinds of stuff into it. The next thing is they might be trying to compensate for a crap, piece of circuitry that they've built, and the other problem is that, it can cause more issues with the signal, that you want that coming out and you want to be able to know what that signal is, you might even want to test it with an oscilloscope to see how clean that preamplifier is bringing that signal through when you're trying to boost it, which is a really good idea. So, that's about as far as I want to go with that, and this was about the most untechnical video that I've done. So, we're not getting into no numbers or nothing. Try to keep it that simple. It's to turn the volume up a little bit on that signal, and you don't want it to do anything to that signal other than turn the volume up on it. And ask, what is that preamplifier how's that going to affect the signal in every way, shape, or form? And just like the last videos I made, be very direct and ask the manufacturer, well, what is that stuff going to do to the signal, And if they give you the runaround, ask somebody else. But, you want something that's going to boost that signal. That's what it was made to do. So, peace, hope, love. I hope you enjoy playing with your preamplifier. And I hope that now that when you look at it, that you understand that that's what it's supposed to be do. All that other stuff is other stuff, bro. Peace, hope, love. See you in the next series.